welcome to this week's Scots in Us podcast. I'm Camilla Hellman, President of the American Scottish Foundation. I'm delighted you're joining as we begin our journey around Scotland's young distilleries, part 2. We're going to begin by speaking with Gary Maclean, Scotland's national chef, who will speak to us of how he sees this young, ever-growing industry, and speak to us also of the wonderful gins that are appearing, often a prelude to the whiskies that follow. We're then going to go up to Harris and hear again from Simon Erlanger of Harris Distillery. And then we travel back to Edinburgh and to tell you more of Johnnie Walker Princes Street, a wonderful new emporium of whiskey and discovery. Before we go outside Edinburgh to Leith and the young distillery that is there, starting with gin, but already importing port and sherry so that they can use the casks as they mature their whiskies. So let's begin our conversation with Gary Maclean. And now I'm delighted to be joined by Gary Maclean, a man of many titles. No one busier, Gary. You're just back from Alaska, from the Highland Games there. And so thank you for joining us today.
No, not at all. My pleasure. It's always good to talk, Camilla.
You have so many roles. You wear so many hats, from the national chef for Scotland to restaurateur to author, about to the second book just coming out, and as your role as senior lecturer at the City of Glasgow College, which means a great deal to you, I know, as you inspire so many people.
My role at the college is the most important, without a doubt. Being in education is the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning. I really enjoy being part of that, and I've dedicated, much as I've given many titles. And my role at the college has changed over the years. I'm now executive chef at the City of Glasgow College, so my role kind of is fairly wide open, so I can get involved in lots of different things. But I mean, I've devoted 25 years into education, and the other part of my education was being educated. So I've really been a part of that college my whole career from 1988. That's how old I am. So I went more or less straight from part-time student graduate after 8 years, and then I had a kind of year not being involved, and then I was asked back to be a part-time lecturer, which I did for 13 years. And then
we couldn't think of anyone better to ask to join us, as you do on so many occasions, to guide us about everything that's evolving at this very interesting time within the industry of whiskey in Scotland. There are several new distilleries emerging and new brands coming through from large as well as from large names as well as the small little ones. But what are some of the exciting introductions that you see?
I think this is all coming off the back of the crazy gin craze that has swept Britain and much of Europe. And what it's done, from a Scottish point of view, and when I go around distilleries and I speak to the new distilleries, the brand new distilleries, that they're able to open purely because they can sell gin and lay down whiskey. And I think that's exciting. I don't think there's ever been such a burst of new distilleries in Scotland and in England, believe it or not, are opening a lot of distilleries. But behind all of that, when you meet the people, yes, they're very passionate about their gin, but they're excited about the whiskey that's waiting to come. So we have got a lot of exciting new whiskies that are going to be getting drip fed through between now and probably the next 25 years due to the gin craze. So we can thank gin.
But there's also a lot of great gins coming through. It's not just this craze to make a gin.
Yeah.
Great gins.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic, and the way people are approaching them. There's so many different markets for gin now. There's, it's no longer just a gin and tonic. There's people being quite high end with them, and they're really, coming up with really different mixes and things like that. And then there's the fun ones as well, that are targeting a much wider audience. So, and to a degree, whiskey's doing that as well. Whiskey's doing a lot to to bring in that younger audience. And it's amazing the amount of people I meet, even out with, you know, chefs and stuff, and obviously my travels, the amount of people that I meet that are absolutely hooked on whiskey. And again, I was talking to a chef in Alaska, and his knowledge of whiskey was unbelievable. I mean, much 10 times better than mine, you know, and I live a stone throw from about 7 distilleries. But you know, so they're definitely getting that younger market. So they are, and you know, they're on high streets. You know, if you look at Johnnie Walker and Princes Street, they're really, you know, a 3-story, 4-story whiskey experience. And as we were talking earlier, you know, going on the rooftop bar overlooking Edinburgh Castle, Princes Street, the Balmoral, all these iconic landmarks.
They've got some very interesting new whiskies at Johnnie Walker too, which seems to speak to the fact that things have evolved so much, taking into account the female audience that may want to have more of a cocktail or want a lighter whiskey than maybe the heavier, smokier ones. And also then all that's being done with whiskey, because there's so much focus now on the pairings of it as well as the cocktail. Yeah,
most definitely. And, you know, and again, that's back to that branding, that younger branding, you know, attracting that younger market. And as you mentioned, females, you know, when I was in the bar in Johnnie Walker, most of the customers were females between the age of 20 and 30. So it's quite interesting how the whole dynamic and the whole image is changing. But there's a lot of fun out there. And, you know, when you see when we do the whiskey tastings at any events in the States, you know, the experts are in their 20s and they're coming at it with a completely different viewpoint. But and the other side of the thing is as well as the internet. So Instagram and TikTok are massive tools for most companies, and in particular whiskey companies. And when they're really showing off, you know, these beautiful, colorful, exciting, and sometimes gastronomic, you know, when they do the bubbles and stuff, you know, they bring you in. So they do bring you in.
We've also got a lot of new whiskey distilleries appearing over here.
Is that right? Oh, brilliant.
Pardon. When you're over here, I'll have to bring you up to date a little bit on all that's going on. But very much based upon everything happening from Scotland, from the heritage. But how do you work with whiskey at this moment? Are you working a sort of in pairings or adding it, or how do you tackle incorporating whiskey into the menus?
Well, the first thing I do is actually taste it. But a lot of working with whiskey is a trial and error. You know, something like Lafroig as a chef is something, you know, that is huge whiskey, you know, smoky and you know, it's very, very distinct. And it's something you wouldn't automatically think to cook with. And I tried it with a Cranachan, you know, Cranachan dessert. You know, and a Cranachan dessert, you'd probably expect something a bit more mellow, a Macallan or something that's got that little hint. I tried it with Lafroig and it was stunning. I mean, what it did for that dish was totally elevate it, and it made, you know, it's a dish with 5 ingredients. So it made that dish, it lifted that dish completely. And I couldn't believe it. I really, as a chef of, you know, I think I was cooking 30 years at that point, to then discover that completely changed as soon as you hit it with some honey and some fresh fruit and things like that. Quite incredible. So there's always a way of learning. I did a series of whiskey dinners in Edinburgh a couple of months ago, and it was all tied in with fun and cocktails and things like that. And I got whiskey into every single dish, and honestly, it works. It works as well as wine. There you go. Whiskey works as well as wine. So.
Now, but as we talk about menus, I love your first book that you brought out.
Yep, thank you.
I know that you have another one, a second one that is now finished. Will we see it here in the States?
I think there's a dedicated US launch in the spring of 23.
All right. Good.
So my last book was available, the same copy was available worldwide. There's going to be a dedicated
copy for the US market, which is really exciting.
Well, we work in ounces, you know.
Exactly. But to be fair, Camilla, the second book, Scottish Kitchen, I did write it with all you guys in mind, and I did do metric and US measurements.
Yes.
But there is a North American copy getting made as we speak. So there's a US publisher is going to really push that out in the States. So we'll be talking later on that to help that get pushed out, and hopefully it's ready for Tartan Week, which would be brilliant.
I know, that would be fantastic. That would be good. So when you look at the whiskey industry in Scotland at this moment, you're excited by it.
Most definitely. I don't have any facts or figures. I don't think there's ever been such an increase in distilleries in Scotland ever. You know, it's quite incredible. Glasgow's just got a brand new distillery, and Glasgow's been void of distilleries, I think, for 200 years, other than Auchentoshan, which is to the north of the city, heading towards Loch Lomond. There's a Clydeside Distillery, and they've taken over the pump house right in the heart of Glasgow, right on the Clyde. So, you know, and I think they've been up and running maybe 2 years, so they're a wee bit away from maybe getting their first whiskies out. But they've got a full visitor centre and invested a lot of money. I haven't been in yet, and I don't know what their ethos is and where their styling and stuff's coming from. But as you go past it, it looks amazing. And to be in the heart of Glasgow, right next to the Clyde, is really, really special.
We were speaking to Leith the other day, who have got a gin going and everything. They're also importing the port and the sherry and distributing that so that they know the casks that they'll be using for their whiskey.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's so exciting to join them on their journeys. I mean, Harris is just a very short while away from being able to finally have their whiskey out there, but their gin is winning golds all over the place.
It's unbelievable. I think Harris Distillery, they're I don't know if they class themselves as disruptors, but they've done everything their own way. You know, they've got a clear vision of what they want and what they want to put out. And I'm looking forward to seeing them. Yeah, they totally understand the brand. They've got the most beautiful bottle that I've ever seen. I'm interested to see, have you seen their whiskey bottle? Have they revealed that yet?
They would, Simon Erlanger was talking with us, and he in fact decided on the bottle 10 years ago.
Wow.
And so he's now trying to bring it forward. And see it. So you'll have to have a chat with him and find out what's going on. You know, but the other thing that's coming through that we saw with our Becky, we see with Harris, is that they're managing to get distribution over here sorted a little bit more easily, which is so important because each state has its own regulation.
That's right. Yeah, it's quite a complicated system, isn't it?
Yes, but they does seem to be a little bit better than it was. So when we talk to them, we are able to, they may not be in every state, but they're in some, and here is the internet and the website, and here you click and you can know how to get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great seeing more and more, and obviously I do a little bit of work with the SDI, you know, and helping get, you know, fish and shellfish into American markets, but that goes hand in hand with the whiskey and gin and rum and things like that, and it's quite interesting. You know, I was recently in South Carolina with SDI, and we were there with Carl. You've met Carl, who works for SDI, and he's the guy who'll kind of be the foot soldiers in the States and try and make sure that the distribution's good and make sure that they can get into particular states. And it's just fascinating to hear, you know, the story of how do you actually get a new product into a state. It's quite interesting. The amount of work is unbelievable, but there's a lot of support out there for manufacturers through the government and SDI that can help them get there.
I think that they have made huge strides in getting it simplified or a more working model, because you can see the difference in how it's working now, and that's fantastic. I think it's important that smaller distilleries get that gateway as well.
Yes.
And Harris is a prime example of a small distillery that is doing big things.
Well, they also they have a good, these small distilleries, they are a small team, but they've got great professionals.
Yeah.
And they understand that it doesn't happen overnight and that they've got to keep on at building up the message, which with Facebook, TikTok, as you say, Instagram really is so much easier for them to do that. But I'm so excited that you're around. We're going backwards and forth again, that we're going to see you shortly.
I know, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's airports. I've never seen an airport's busier, and I think I've been to the States since we were allowed back in November. I think I've been over 6 times, so I've been over lots and lots. Chicago, South Carolina, Alaska was amazing. Been to New York a few times. So
you had a big fish with you that you caught.
Do you know, Camilla, that was a rubber fish. So this is Alaska's take on the Highland Games, and they've got all the usual, the hammer thrown and the cabers and everything else. But that's a 50-pound rubber salmon, and the big athletes, they swing it above their head and try and get it as far as they can. And I think the record's something like 37 feet, and the big lad I was in the photograph with, he got it that far. I couldn't lift it. Honestly, I couldn't lift it. Never mind fling it. But it was.
The hammer toss has a new take in Alaska.
Well, that's what they're doing. I thought, you know what, it really sums up the Alaskan Games. So maybe each state should try and find their own game, and then we should bring them all for a state game or something together. So the winner of the state game should all meet up, somewhere handy and compete against each other's games. So, but I just thought, what great fun.
It was wonderful to see you there. I'm off down to Carolina in a couple of days to Grandfather Mountain.
Oh, fantastic.
Very excited about. And we should catch up very shortly to speak further on this, because if you can guide us and give input, it means so much. You are such an ambassador for the whole food industry. And
thank you.
Thank you for all. It's
my pleasure. Brilliant. Thanks, Camilla.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
And I'm delighted that this morning we're catching up with Simon Erlanger. He's the Isle of Harris Distillers Managing Director. He has a long history of working in the industry and has been one of the driving forces in bringing forward the Harris Distillers, who began with the mission to introduce a whiskey from the Isle of Harris. But in the meantime, they have brought out some wonderful gins. So I'm delighted to speak to you again, Simon. Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Camilla. Yeah, lovely to be here again. It's been a few months, I think.
You are really on a very fast track at the moment, because your gin is winning accolades all over the place. You've won several awards recently.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, actually. I mean, we've always entering, these taste awards, and to start to win quite a large number of Masters medals and gold medals is fantastic. I was able to announce this morning to my team on our weekly meeting that we just won another gold, which I think is the Global Gin Masters Award. And so this small team of distillers on the Isle of Harris, they really can't believe it that they're making a gin that's being celebrated all around the world. It's very exciting for them and for the island in general.
Well, the industry has changed so much, whether it be gin or whiskey, through the internet, through the marketing that now happens around everything. We now have a global connection. We're talking to you from New York, and this will go out to our members and audience around the world. It's a different day, isn't it?
It's extraordinary, absolutely. And as you say, I've been in the industry for about far too long to remember, but this is an amazing time, actually, in terms of the explosion of craft distilled beverages, you know, whether it's gin or whiskey or tequila or rum. It's absolutely extraordinary what's happening. I think in the UK, we're up to 800 gin distilleries now. In England, would you believe, there are 45 whiskey distilleries, and there wasn't a single whiskey distillery in England 10 years ago. And, you know, the same's happening all around the world. So in a way, it's fantastic because it gives consumers such an amazing amount of things to choose from, different flavors. It breeds innovation and creativity. In a way, it's also quite complex now for a tiny company like ours, you know, competing on a global stage with limited resources and cutting through, I guess, all of the noise, the virtual noise and the physical noise of all of these products. And I guess at the end of the day, as I always think very simplistically, every one of these bottles has got to find its place on a shop shelf or on a bar. Now, where are they all going to end up? You know, because everybody wants to be more or less in the same bars and in the same shops, because these are the fine places to buy spirits. And yet there obviously isn't room for everybody. And I think that's absolutely fascinating on a physical sense, but also digitally. You know, all of these brands are all fighting for share of mind. They're all trying to send their messages out into the ether to find their target consumer wherever they are in the world. So it's a fascinating time.
You know, the thing that resonates first to me is this is from the Isle of Harris, this wonderful island on the west coast of Scotland. And when you look at your website or look at anything, your bottle, this blue that comes through of the waters of, you know, I think of the waters of Harris, the seas around. It has a wonderful imagery, and I feel we're having a piece of Harris when we take a wonderful gin and tonic with your gin.
Well, that's lovely that you say that, because that's absolutely what we set out to achieve. I mean, as I've discussed with you before, the whole purpose of the distillery is to send Harris out to the world in a bottle, to bring this place to a wider audience through our spirits and through our storytelling, so that we can create ourselves a small number of sustainable jobs for generations to come. But actually, as importantly, or more importantly, to act as a catalyst. We want to bring people to the island so they can discover this magic place for themselves, and thereby they're boosting tourism and all the other industries on the island, and we can reverse the decades of depopulation that Harris has endured. So when you say things like that we're actually managing to send Harris over to the States, for example, where you are, in our bottle and through our storytelling, then that's absolutely what we want to do. And I guess back to your question about the category and my point about all the noise and the clutter that's going on there, I don't tend to think terribly much about that, because my focus really is simply, how do I get this bottle and this message into the hands and minds and hearts of people who I think it will resonate with?
But also, you know, I met you, it must be over 10 years ago now, as you were beginning this journey with Harris. And a very big part of it was also to help the people of Harris and the community there, and to put this new industry alongside all the weaving and everything else that goes there. And so at this point, that really you must have achieved a lot of that. How many people are now involved?
Well, I mean, extraordinarily, last week, we recruited 6 people last week alone, and we're now up to 45 employees. Now, put that in context, our working population of Tarbert is just under 600. And sorry, the working population of Harris is just under 600. So we're employing almost 10% of the working workforce now.
Wow.
You know, this is hugely exciting. We set out with the intention of getting up to about 25 jobs. So we're at 45 today, and we will continue to recruit because we've barely started. We haven't introduced the whiskey yet, and the gin still has huge amounts of potential anyway. So yeah, no, it's tremendously exciting.
Well, you should be so proud of this. And could you tell us a little bit about how you see the challenges and the other distillers coming along? I think you all enhance each other in a way, because gin has had a larger spotlight put on it because of the young new whiskey distilleries that are emerging, because you normally do gin before whiskey.
That's become a model for these new distilleries, as you say. The gin helps to bring in some revenue early on while we're waiting for the whiskey to mature, which is exactly why we introduced the gin, but also to establish a brand and establish a reputation. So that's all been good. I think, you know, there is an element of saturation starting to take place now, you know, and some of the innovation and some of the flavors and different colors that have gone into gin have gone too far. And I think what we're seeing now in the more mature markets like the UK actually is some of that flavoring and coloring has kind of falling away because it really hasn't necessarily done the gin category any good. And people are now increasingly falling back on the classic London dry gin, juniper forward, which is what gin really was always about. So I think what we are going to see over here in the more mature markets is a consolidation happening. Now in America, I think we're still at a very early stage of the gin essence, as we call it, the gin boom. And there's a lot of excitement and a lot of room for growth. And this is why, as a company, we think the USA offers a fantastic future. I mean, we're just literally 13 months into our journey in the US. We're in 11th.
You are now available in select markets, as we might put it here. It's not the easiest place to distribute, but you really have kicked off very well. And if people go to the website, they can find how they can be sourcing your gins in the US now.
Absolutely. If you click on harrisdistillery.com and then click on the American flag or the US at the top of the bar, then that will take you straight to a stockist page. You can just put in your zip code and it will tell you where your nearest retailer is. We aren't everywhere. We're in 11 US states, but most of our business is in New York, California, and Texas. New York has been actually really surprising for us. It really has taken off very quickly. In fact, two of my colleagues were out in New York recently. We held our first ever Kaylee in Brooklyn a couple of months ago. We helped launch a book. There's a chap called the Hebridean Baker. I don't know if you've heard about him. Cognac McLeod, who was over in the States launching his book on baking. And we're doing a lot of work with him actually, and spreading the word about Harris Gin in that way.
Well, I think that, tell me a little bit about the different flavors or blends that you are looking to introduce or have introduced at this moment.
Well, the answer is very simple, none. We have one gin and one gin only. So our strategy is the diametric opposite to what many gin distillers are doing. Our focus is on making a single flavor. Sugar kelp from the sea is our kind of secret, special botanical, less secret, but then special, from the Outer Hebrides, which gives the gin its kind of very subtle, sweet, savory, maritime note. And so what we just do is focus all of our efforts on making that gin as good as it can be day in and day out, rather than introduce new flavors.
Well, also you now have the whiskey coming along, which isn't far away from being on market, is it?
Yes, it's not too far off. I mean, the whiskey itself is really getting close to being ready to be put in a bottle. We're getting very excited about how that's evolving. All the flavor characteristics we dreamt of seem to be coming through in the maturing spirit. And so we're very excited about that. I guess the next challenge for a little company like ours is actually to prepare operationally to be able to launch the whiskey. I know that sounds a bit silly, but it's a huge task to prepare everything, to get all the infrastructure right, to get the team prepared in order to, and the packaging. We've got, of course, there's a bottle. That bottle for the whiskey was designed back in 2013 at the same time as the gin bottle was designed. So now it's a question of bringing that bottle to life and dressing it with labels and capsules and stoppers in a way that's going to have a similar wow effect that the gin bottle had when we first launched that.
We love your gin over at the American Scottish Foundation. We think the bottling is gorgeous and it's a very good product as well, and one that's greatly enjoyable to drink. And as I say, I feel that we're transported to Harris, which is wonderful. So I'm looking forward to hearing when we're going to be able to get the whiskey in the States. This is sounding quite close now.
Yes, and it won't be this year, and it possibly might be next year, but I cannot put a definitive date on it yet.
Is it available in the UK yet?
No, we have not launched our whiskey anywhere.
Oh.
No, so there's a lot of anticipation building.
All right.
And as soon as it's available in the UK, it will also be available in the US in very limited quantities, I have to add. So we will be allocating specific quantities to all of our partners around the world who've been kind of waiting patiently for this moment. So, but I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Okay, this is good. We also talk to Bonhams quite regularly around their whiskey auctions. And so it sounds like you're going to have a whiskey that is going to be a real collector's item too, if the quantities are going to be limited in this way.
Yes, possibly. I mean, what we don't want to do is exploit that. I mean, we will have limited availability to begin with, but we're not going to be pricing it in a way that makes it, you know, a collector's item or totally unaffordable. Of course, it will be, you know, at a very premium price. Everything we do on the island costs a lot of money, so it won't be cheap. But we're not going to be bringing out a sort of a first edition at a particularly high price. It'll be launched at the right price.
Well, you've done that with the gin. And if the marketing around the gin and introduction of the gin is anything to go by, this is just such an exciting time. And I'm so excited for you because having, as I said, met you over 10 years ago as you began this journey, to see where it's now at is just fantastic. So congratulations.
Well, thank you, Camilla. That's wonderful to hear your support, and you know, the support of you and the foundation, and it's going to be down to people in the States, people who support us and who can help us spread the word. We don't have the budgets for grandiose marketing campaigns, so it's going to be very much about creating personal connections like the one we developed 10 years ago, and others around the country who are going to help us to spread that word. So it's really appreciated.
Well, we really love the fact of being able to help you amplify all that you're doing. So please keep in touch, and we're looking forward to hearing the next chapter, and we will let everybody know how they can find the gin now here, and toast back to Harris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this week's Scots in Us podcast. I'm delighted that we're going to be able to catch up with Mary Jane Brett, who is Customer Development Manager at Johnnie Walker Princes Street, Edinburgh. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Hi, Camilla. I'm very well. It's actually afternoon for me, but yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
So when we last spoke, it was around the Scottish North American Community Conference, and you were just opening up at Princes Street. Could you tell us a little bit about all that's been going on as you opened up? And first of all, begin us telling us a little bit about the 200-year history to Johnnie Walker.
Sure, no, absolutely. So yeah, when we spoke last time, yeah, lots happened since then. I think it was around November. We actually opened Johnnie Walker Princes Street in September last year, so it was pretty fresh. It's still fresh, and we've only been open for 10 months, and it's gone past really, really quickly. So yeah, the 200 years is really important to us. John Walker first opened his business in Scotland in 1820. So it's actually 202 years old now, the business, and it's grown from very humble beginnings as a small grocery shop in the west of Scotland in a town called Kilmarnock, through to this international global brand. You know, Johnnie Walker is the most popular Scotch whisky in the world, and with the opening of Johnnie Walker Princes Street in Scotland, it's really the first time that there's been a home for people from around the world to come and visit and find out more about the story. And it is an absolutely amazing story, and something that's really at the forefront of pretty much everything we do in the building at Johnnie Walker Princes Street. So,
and it's an outstanding building.
Yeah, it's a very historic building in itself. Yeah.
You're a wonderful, iconic, historic building that you've taken.
Yeah, so we're right in the centre of Edinburgh, opposite Edinburgh Castle at the west end of Princes Street, and the building used to be a department store for many, many years. It was also, part of it was a bank, and you know, we've been very careful with the development to really keep the structure. You know, it looks the same as it would have done 150 years ago whenever the building was built. I'm not sure exactly, but there's a lot of architectural heritage in the building that we've been very, very keen to preserve. And yeah, we couldn't ask for a better location, just across the street from Princes Street Gardens, with, you know, fabulous views over to the castle. But
and
you know,
having this historic building lends itself to reflect the history of over 200 years, because you've made it atmospheric from what I've been seeing from pictures and everything else, as well as contemporary.
Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly it, Camilla. There's a real mix between the contemporary and the historic. So when you first walk into the building, you walk into this amazing welcome lobby, which is pretty much unchanged structurally from what it would have been like when the building was built. Beautiful marble columns, absolutely stunning. But then as you progress through the building with the experiences and the bars, it really is at the forefront of technology and architecture. We've installed 2 rooftop bars on the roof, which are absolutely fantastic. And you know, the experiences, they're a mix of storytelling and technology. So we're bringing all of those different elements together.
And what is so wonderful, as you take it through, you're also progressing the way we look at whiskey and experience it. And sustainability and eco is very important and front and center to what you're speaking of now and doing at Johnnie Walker.
Yeah, and you know, quite rightly so, and so should we all be trying to do that. You know, we with our attractions in Scotland, and very much so Johnnie Walker Princes Street at the forefront. You know, with the developments that we've been doing, we felt a great responsibility to build as sustainably and to deliver experiences as sustainably as we possibly can. We opened with the Green Tourism Gold Award, which is, you know, we're really pleased about. That just kind of reflects our efforts with sustainability. You know, there's always going to be work to be done. You know, and as part of, you know, a bigger company, you know, Johnnie Walker is a brand that sits within the Diageo company, and Diageo as a whole have, really stretching targets for sustainability, particularly aiming towards 2030. We look at sustainability as one of the pillars. Another one is inclusion and diversity, and another one is around the approach to positive drinking as well. And every asset and part of the experience at Johnnie Walker Princes Street has been viewed through that lens of how can we make it more sustainable, what can we do to reduce waste, and look at the city centre, wildlife, and all those kind of things. There's all these little things that are going on inside the building to try and enhance that sustainability credentials.
Don't you think that the whole way we speak of whiskey and how it is now targeted has in the past 10 years changed so much, because it's no longer looked at as a wee dram at the end of the evening or for the men or something. Women count into this a lot too. We like slightly maybe lighter whiskies and sometimes, and we like cocktails. I feel that the whiskey cocktail has come and forward again and developed.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, what really very central to what we've been doing is making whiskey as accessible to everyone and as appealing to everyone as possible. And the cocktail mixology is all a part of that. The highball was invented in the 1920s.
Yes.
It's not a new thing.
No.
People seem to have forgotten about highballs and cocktails and all that kind of thing, and got very focused on single malts and drams and very serious drinking whiskey by a fireplace in an armchair.
Only a touch of ice.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Add no water. Don't do anything sacrilegious to it. So what we're trying to do is, if you want to enjoy a whiskey like that, please do. We have some amazing whiskies that are perfectly enjoyed as a dram by a fire in an armchair. But we want to say, there are other ways to try it too. Come and visit us and try an amazing highball, a Johnnie Walker and ginger, or some really, really out there experimental cocktails. And we find it's not just the ladies that like cocktails. A lot of men quite like them too. And another important thing that I wanted to mention was that we're really with going back to that pillar I was talking about, one of our goals for 2030 is about positive drinking. So not drinking is also an option. So everything we do at Johnnie Walker Princes Street, you have non-alcoholic options there as well that taste amazing. Beautiful cocktails and highballs that you don't have to have any alcohol in to get that full experience. And that's really important to us as well.
So have you had new introductions that have been made to the market that's more targeted to a lighter palate in the whiskey blends? Have you been introducing? I saw that you had the Year of the Tiger and the Year of the Ox, and the beautiful bottles, stunning. But have they been introduced with a different blending idea? Are they? So essentially what we do, and this applies as much to Johnnie Walker as it does to our other blends and single malt whiskies, we're bringing out what we call new expressions all the time. And what we tend to have a core range. So your Johnnie Walker Black Label is there. It's been going for years and years. It's there year in, year out. All this, very, very, it's like our core permanent collection, if you see what I mean. But then we'll look at bringing out special editions, collectible editions, that kind of thing. And to your mention of lighter whiskies, there is a blend of Johnnie Walker called Johnnie Blonde, which came out not long ago, which is perfect for drinking with lemonade. Very simple. Add a slice of lemon, bit of ice. It's a summer cocktail. But you mentioned the Year of the Tiger, and that would be the Johnnie Walker Blue Label. So with that, every year we bring out a bottling of Johnnie Walker Blue Label, which celebrates the Chinese Lunar New Year. And it's all about celebrating prosperity, good fortune, and that celebration around about that time each year. So
you know, the liquid in Blue Label is wonderful. It's one of our top level blends,
Right.
you know, with Johnnie Walker. And the team commissioned an artist for the Year of the Tiger. It was Shan Jiang, who produced all the artwork for that bottle. And then I looked up the tasting notes. It sounds delicious. I really want to get myself a bottle. You know, vanilla, honey, caramel, hazelnut, dark chocolate. These are all the kind of tasting notes that you would get from that bottle. But yeah, every different expression that comes out, whether it's a blend or a single malt, has a different flavor profile. And that comes from the way it's matured, the way it's distilled. There's, you know,
they're having
many
some
different
fun.
ways. Yeah.
They're having some fun. They're mixing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very creative process.
Yes.
Very creative process. And also, just to say, you know, going back to, you know, role models and women enjoying whiskey, we were really, really pleased towards the end of last year to announce a new master maker of Johnnie Walker, who is the first woman master maker in the 200-year history of Johnnie Walker. She's called Emma Walker. So the previous master maker, called Jim Beveridge, retired towards the end of last year. Now Emma is doing that, is in charge of the master maker role for the Johnnie Walker blends, which, you know, we're really excited about. And equally, I was just looking the other day at who visits us in terms of demographics and gender, and we're pretty evenly split. The bookings the other day when I was looking, 51% were made by men, 49% were made by women. And our flagship experience, the Journey of Flavour, which is the tour that we really want everyone to do, we just tip it with the women booking 52% of our tickets. So that's something that we're really pleased about.
You know, as we all begin to travel again with our families, are young people allowed? Are people under 18 allowed to be with you, or do they get a special wristband, or how can they visit with their families?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Johnnie Walker Princes Street is not a distillery. We don't make whiskey there. Johnnie Walker is a blend. So when you come to Johnnie Walker Princes Street, we don't have considerations about hot surfaces and stills and all those other kind of things that are a consideration when we think about allowing, you know, young children.
Yeah.
I'm talking like under 8 around.
Yes.
We don't have those concerns at Johnnie Walker Princes Street. So you could bring a babe in arms along. Absolutely no problem. The rule we have is that you don't drink if you're under 18. That's the rule of the land, and that's the rule we follow. But as I said before, we have amazing non-alcoholic options that, you know, anyone
can go online and book tickets to come and visit you.
Yeah.
And you're right there in the centre of Edinburgh. And what a great new addition to experiencing Edinburgh, to now be able to come and join you.
Yeah, and we've been growing in popularity ever since we opened. You know, it's been a bit of a roller coaster coming out of the pandemic. The last few months, I would say probably since March, we've really seen a boost in visitors, and very much so from the US as well. You know, you're our biggest international market coming to Scotland at the moment, and we're just looking forward to welcoming more international visitors. We've been very lucky. We've had a lot of interest from people that live in the city and people throughout the UK. But, you know, having international tourists coming back would be absolutely amazing. Yeah, you just need to go on. We have johnniewalker.com. Visit us in Edinburgh. It's pretty simple. We've got a few different experiences you can do. The Journey of Flavour is amazing. Very immersive, personalised. You get 3 drinks, and it's just a fun, vibrant experience. And I've done it quite a few times, and I love it every time I do it. It's always something new.
I'm planning to be in Edinburgh in August, and so I'm looking forward to popping in.
Sure.
You as well. And we're going to be, you know, hoping to hear more from you and to talking further, and also talking to Emma Walker. I think it's fabulous that you have a new master maker who's the first female for you. This is breaking ground. Fantastic, fantastic news. So
Yeah,
thank you
absolutely.
for sharing all this. I think the Johnnie Walker Blonde with lemonade sounds a very good combination for the summer.
Yeah. It's delicious. It's really light. It's just a nice mixed drink. Bit of ice, lemon, sunshine, ideally.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll share that with us and we can share it with everybody. But thank you for joining us this morning and spending some time with us.
A pleasure. Thanks, Camilla.
Good afternoon, Ian, and thank you for joining us today. We're fascinated to learn all about the distillery and the three arms to it that you have, because your long-term plans are to introduce whiskey in a very unusual botanical and eco way from reading through your website. But right now, your gin has really been garnering a lot of praise and winning a lot of awards. And you also have sherry and port. So can you start us off by telling us how it all came to be and the journey that you've been on to get to this point? Because it's not simple.
No, indeed it's not. Good afternoon, Camilla. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast today. So yes, our journey has been a long one, and it really, I guess, goes back to perhaps 2012. My business partner and I, lifelong friends, known each other since we were 4, and we grew up in Edinburgh together. We ended up in London. I was working in the wine industry. He'd become an accountant. He ended up working for a big company called WeWork from America, and he became their finance director. But we'd both become obsessive about whiskey. And back in 2012, we began to play with sort of making whiskey in our back garden a little bit, through that, we discovered that, despite being huge whiskey fans, people always spoke to us about water and casks and stills, but we discovered that actually by far the most complicated bit of making whiskey was in the brewing part, because whiskey is distilled beer. First you brew a beer and you distill that beer into whiskey. And it's actually in brewing that beer that there were so many decisions to make. So what yeast do you use, what grain, how long do you ferment for, all these different things. And in playing with that, we thought, God, there's something in this actually. There's a lot more to making whiskey, and we could create something quite interesting with this particular thing. So that's where the idea was born. And the other element being, coming from Edinburgh, Scotland's capital city, at the time there was no single malt whiskey distillery up here, and we thought that was an opportunity as well to have a single malt in Scotland's capital city. So it began there in 2012, and so began a very, very, very long journey with highs and lows. And we found an investor, we found a site, we designed a distillery, we lost the investor, we found new investors, we lost the site, we're right back to square one. And that takes us to about 2016 when we finally managed to find our current site. And then we began again, if you like. And so, we're now 2022 and we still haven't quite finished construction of the distillery, but it should be finished finally this year. So yeah, that's a 10-year journey. And originally
have you begun the process of the whiskey? Because whiskey, often people produce the gins before they get to the whiskey. Are your whiskeys underway?
To a certain extent. So we haven't started producing whiskey in any commercial sense yet. We can only do that once we have a whiskey distillery. But I always say we've been creating our whiskey for several years now, because from 2 idiots playing in a back garden in London 10 years ago, we then hooked up with Heriot-Watt University, who are based just outside Edinburgh. And with them, we developed a research program that we've been running for 3 years. And that was all about researching and investigating the opportunities with yeast and fermentation in whiskey production. For a long time, the whiskey industry sort of glossed over this bit of the process, and they used something called distiller's yeast that just sort of produces a lot of alcohol and gives them lots of whiskey. We decided to try out all sorts of yeasts that haven't been used in whiskey production before. We looked at wine yeast, brewer's yeast, sake yeast, rum yeast, and we created scores of tiny samples of spirits using all these different yeasts. 24 different yeasts we trialed, 24 little spirits we created with those. And of those, we selected our 7 favorite ones that were creating incredibly intense flavors and fascinating flavors that we could bring into our whiskey. And even with those, we've selected our top 2 that we're going to start producing our whiskey with. So although we haven't started commercially producing whiskey, we've been doing a huge amount of work over the last few years in terms of defining what kind of whiskey we're going to make and how we're going to make it. And I mean, you mentioned the port and sherry as well. I have some bottles here. Actually, one of the first things we did when we announced our plans is we bottled a sherry, which a lot of people thought, my goodness, what on earth are these people are doing? But this was actually focusing on the maturation end of our whiskey, on the casks. So as many of your listeners may be aware of, people love, including myself, whiskies that have been matured in sherry casks. And that's actually a practice that originates from where we're building our whiskey in Leith. So we're in Leith, which is the port of Edinburgh, if you like, and historically, really Scotland's gateway to the world, right up until the 20th century, where we began to face America more with Glasgow. But until, for most of Scotland's history, it was Leith. And it was in Leith where you had casks of sherry and port would arrive into the harbour, but also where all the whiskey merchants stored their spirit. And the whiskey merchants would say to the sherry merchant, oh, once you've emptied your cask, I'll take that and put my spirit in it. And they began to discover that customers loved the whiskey that had been stored in the sherry cask. So that's a practice that really emerged from Leith, where we're making our distillery. So that's a story we wanted to tell, but also we found a specific producer in Spain whose casks we're going to use to mature our whiskey, and we sell their sherry as well. So again, we've been using the years, in developing this project to really focus on how we're going to make our whiskey, but also how we're going to mature it, finding the best casks possible, all the different strands, slowly pulling them together to make our Scotch whiskey.
But in the meantime, you are producing a gin.
We are indeed, yes.
Really garnering a lot of praise, and it's quite an unusual botanical with peppercorns, if I'm read everything correctly.
Well, yes. So I'm talking to you now from our brand new gin distillery. So for the longest time, we were just focused on whiskey, and we thought, the world doesn't need another gin. But really, the whiskey thing took so long, we began to develop some ideas about what we might do if we made a gin. And actually, we developed the idea of there were so many gins emerging around the world, and lots of wild and wonderful flavors. And I knew where I could find a rhubarb gin or a raspberry gin or whatever flavor of gin. But actually, we thought there was space to try and do something really classic, really sort of go back to the origin of what should a benchmark London dry gin taste like. And that was the origin of how we came up with our gin, Lind and Lime. So a classic gin has to have juniper at its core. Juniper is the key botanical in any gin, and indeed it's where the name gin comes from. The Dutch word for juniper is Genever gin. So you've got gin front and center. But then, as we sort of dug into the heritage of where we are, we discovered the story of James Lind that we named our gin after. James Lind was a doctor from Edinburgh who identified that citrus fruit prevented scurvy. And he's almost more famous for conducting one of the world's first recorded clinical trials, where he put sailors into 6 groups, gave them each a separate diet, and observed that the ones who were consuming citrus fruits didn't get scurvy. And so, as I said, going back to that classic gin recipe, you've got juniper, but then you always have a citrus element in a gin. And so we decided we would use lime to sort of celebrate that James Lind and his research. Leith is also where Rose's lime cordial was first produced, now owned by Coca-Cola, but again, another sort of lime strand to where we're from. And so we developed this idea for our gin that would not only sort of create a benchmark style, but also tell stories about Leith and the provenance of where it's made. And we launched it back in 2018 in a very small industrial unit down the road from where I'm standing right now, right next to the car pound. If you ever had your car towed in Leith, you knew where to find our distillery. And we had very low expectations. We thought, the world doesn't need another gin, but we'll make one anyway and see how it goes. And it just went bananas. It has been hugely successful.
You've won gold from the Spirit Masters in the UK, gold from the Craft Spirits in Berlin, gold from the Bartender Spirit Awards in the United States, and the best London dry gin of 2020 for the Scottish Gin Awards. And you just told me when we were chatting earlier that we're going to be able to enjoy your gin very shortly here in the States.
Absolutely, yes. We're very excited this year. So we are already exporting to 24 countries around the world. It's taken us a bit longer to get into the US, but we're very excited to finally be sending our first shipment off in July. So I think it'll be available to in a variety of states. I'm not sure exactly which ones to begin with, but probably from September, October. Which is, and in fact, this year we just won a double gold medal from the San Francisco Spirits competition as well, which was very exciting indeed. So yes, we're ready and primed. But possibly the award I'm most proud of, I'm just going to name another one, is last year we won most sustainable gin from the Scottish Gin Awards, because we decided from day one to sort of integrate as much sort of responsibility and sustainability into how we produce our products. So our gin is produced with 100% plastic-free materials. We use 100% organic ingredients in it, and we power our distillation here from renewable electricity, 100% electricity sourced from renewable sources. So it's a very delicious product, but it's also very responsibly made, and something that we intend to integrate into everything we do as a company.
Well, we are delighted to meet you. We're very excited to be now aware of your journey and to join you on it, and to share the news that you're going to have around the sherry and the port, and most especially the gin, in the coming weeks with everybody here, because we will share that through our news broadcasts and our bulletins, and also I hope catch up with you when you open the whiskey distillery. I think it'd be great if we could join you and see how that's coming along.
Absolutely, yes. Well, we're meeting at quite an exciting stage in our story. This year, obviously, we've just moved into this new distillery, but by the end of the year, finally, the Port of Leith Distillery will be up and running, and we'll have whiskey pouring off our still. So absolutely, we'll love to keep in touch and share our story as it progresses. So it's going to be an exciting few years ahead of us, certainly.
Well, I'm going to be popping into Edinburgh in a couple of weeks and in August. So I would love to pop down and see if I can see the distillery and see what's going on.
Certainly.
That bottle looked a very interesting vessel. It wasn't a plain old bottle.
So yeah, again, as we sort of learned about the history of where we produce our gin, so you had all these merchants bringing barrels of port and sherry into Leith, and they had to be decanted into bottles. And so in Leith, there was a massive wine bottle manufacturing industry, the Leith Glassworks, producing wine bottles. So that inspired the shape of our bottle to use that wine bottle shape. And in fact, on the base of our bottle, there's a little sort of Easter egg. We marked the Leith Glassworks as a sort of tribute to that industrial heritage of the area. And then the color of the glass is because we have a very high recycled content in our glass. It's 75% recycled, and we use this off-white color, which is sort of a blend of white and green glass, if you like. And then we added the ribs just to make it more beautiful. But yes, the bottle is what really draws people into our product, without a doubt.
And the base of your bottle looks very almost handmade, the way. Yeah.
Oh, you think so? Yes. Well, it's not handmade. I must, it comes to us from Italy, but
really?
But yeah, no, but it was a very long project to make this. It was a good 18 months of sort of development, slowly but surely, sort of different iterations of the design, etc. But that time certainly paid off in the end, because it's, as I say, it's what's drawn so many people to our gin. And then they taste it and they come back for more because they like what's inside the bottle. So.
And one last question. At the moment, your port and your sherry is coming in from Spain and Portugal?
Exactly right, yes. Yeah. So we found two exemplary producers whose wine we buy and we share and we enjoy. So here's our port, for example. So this is produced by a small family producer in the Douro Valley, where port is made, called Martha's Estate. And they were previously selling their Tawny port to a far larger blender, and it was disappearing into a large blend. But now we get their wine bottled specifically for us. And it's a Tawny port, which is a lighter, more delicate style of port. It's matured in a barrel for 6 to 8 years, and it produces these lovely, complex, nutty and dried fruit flavors. So it's an absolute, as I say, my background before this was in the wine industry. So these products are very close to my heart, and I love the port particularly very much. But then it is bottled in Portugal, and it's bottled, and the sherry is bottled in Spain.
Right.
but then and that's because it's the law. Port has to be bottled in Portugal. Sherry has to be bottled in Spain. But then we buy the empty casks and ship those over for our whiskey. We've just been placing our first large orders for casks from both producers, ready for the whiskey that's going to be pouring off our stills in the not too distant future. So,
well, this is fantastic. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'm fascinated. You're busy in there, and we will catch up with you very soon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Camilla.
Thank you for joining us this month. I've really enjoyed speaking to these young distilleries. It's so exciting as we follow their journey and then see them arrive into the United States for all of us to enjoy too. And so to learn more about the programs and projects surrounding the American Scottish Foundation, please go to our website, americanscottishfoundation.org. And so join us again the first and third Monday of the month for another episode of Scots in Us.